Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 156. This is an episode I've been looking forward to for a long time for a number of different reasons. One, because I know how good it's going to be, but also we always try and catch up, don't we, Wayne? And we never find time to actually get a chance to sit and have a chat. So that's another reason why I'm looking forward to this. And I'm joined by the founder and performance manager at Richardson Sport, Wayne Richardson. So Wayne, thank you for coming on, mate.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
And I was looking before, the first podcast we did was December 2018, which is mental. Like, there's so much happened in that time. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Amazing. You know what I mean? Especially, obviously, for you as well, podcast-wise, you know what I mean? And some of the fantastic guests that you've been on there, and I've been inspired by some of the guests as well. But to be part of that has been amazing, for how you set out and being part of that is, it's massive. So thank you. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Not at all, mate. You're always coming back on at some point, even if it took us a few years to organise it. But Wayne, we've got loads to get through in this. So I want to get into a bit of background on yourself first. Obviously, you talked about it in the previous episode, but let's just give a bit of an overview, your career, and then talk to us about Richardson Sport. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, okay. So started out purely by walking past Platt Lane, which is the old City training facility. And I was quite lucky because City used to house their training facility on one area in Moss Side. And I used to watch the academy and the first team train there, but at the same time, it had a community element as well. And I started at Man City. I spent probably about 18 years on and off working at Platt Lane, and was very fortunate to work with some really, really good coaches there. Not directly straight into the first team or the academy, but just working in the gym, doing some community work. And at the same time, there was some opportunities that came up working with the academy as well. But I think at the time where most of your listeners and most of the practitioners that I've been on there, where they've gone and done internships and stuff as well and been successful, I was quite fortunate because what I did was, while I was working in the gym, I remember a coach watching me and I was helping a few footballers and not connected to Man City at the time. And he approached me and said to me, "How often do you do this? All this kind of, what are you doing?" And I just said, "Well, I'm just doing some running mechanics and doing some pre-activation." He said, "What is it? Can you explain to me?" And at the time at City, remember if they got relegated and they were in like the old second division, still having 30,000 turn up at Platt Lane. So he said to me, "What are you doing?" And I told him what I was doing. He said, "Will you implement some of that with some of the academy?" And the academy, they only had the physio, the manager, the academy manager. There was no sports science kind of thing behind it. There was nothing at all. There was no support for the players. There was no mentors. There was no nutritionists. There was nothing at all. So I was able to kind of go in there and implement a few things in the day. And it was quite fortunate to then do that. At the same time, there was other things in the evening that came from that, the likes of, England lacrosse and working with non-league teams and setting up kind of like non-league camps for teams to come in and do pre-season work. So during that time, I was there probably 3 or 4 times a week. But then at the same time, there was an individual company that set up when the Premier League was formed called New Life Fitness. And there was a guy there called Eddie Baranowski. I think Tom Little must have mentioned him a while back of people that we've kind of touched on. And he kind of gave me an insight into working with which was the polar heart rate monitors and the watch. It was the nearest thing before they started having catapult vests and stat sports vests and having data analysis and everything. And we were able to go to different clubs. So I was able 4 days at Man City and 3 days working over the weekends and stuff as well, working for this guy who's based in Huddersfield. And it was a great insight in terms of like working with different teams, working with individuals, working with first team players. And then unfortunately what happened was at that time, Ben, the Premier League made it compulsory that everyone had to be of a degree and master's status. So I got a call back at Man City and they said, "Unfortunately, Wayne, we're enjoying all this good work that you're doing and what you're doing," and same with Eddie Baranowski, "but we need somebody in here or of degree equivalent." So I had to go back to university which was quite tough then, because then I'm having to work part-time, and then I'm having to do all my kind of like studying at the same time, you know, not been in university or college for a long time since leaving school, reacquainting myself with different things and different methods. And then when I went back into it, all the jobs were basically taken, or all the managers either been sacked or moved on. So it's a completely different, so I had to kind of reinvent myself. And it was only when I then received a phone call from a top coach at Man City at the time, when City went into doing all this and moved to Carrington. He rang me and said to me, there's an opportunity for you to go to a Premier League club as an academy sports scientist stroke, you know, strength conditioning coach. And I went down south to then go for this interview, and which I'll touch on later on, Ben. It was an ultimate nightmare. And I just said, you know, if this is what it's all about, you know, and I was pulling my hair out a bit, thinking, well, which way do I go? What do I do? You know, I don't know where to go. And I came out of it, and I remember my partner, she said to me, Wayne, what's the situation? What have you got on with the interview? And I said, look, no, it's I don't think it's a goer. I said, listen, I've been thinking about this all the time, and for probably about 2-3 weeks. I don't know what you feel about this, but why don't you start your own thing? And I said, what's that? She said, Richardson Sport. And I said, nah, I'm not having that. This is some sort of joke. And she went, no, what I've done is I've contacted a few places. I spoke to a few people. We can go and we're going to have a meeting with these people at Sports City. This is what we're going to do. And how she had it all mapped out then. Had it all mapped out. And I was just despondent, because my main aim at the time while working in football was working at a club. Or probably your listeners will probably aspire to working. You've got to be with the first team. You've got to be in around that. You've got to be, you know, you've got your number on, or your name on your top. You know, you're wearing a tracksuit. You feel quite part of it. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it was like, nah. You know, if this is what it's all about, I'm not really interested. So we started 2010. We started Richardson Sport in 2010, June 2010. And Ben, you know what? I've never looked back since. It's been a ride, but it's been an amazing ride, because those things in the past has set me up for what has happened now. And if I didn't have people around me that basically had my best interests at heart, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. You know, so football-wise, it's taught me a lot being in and around those kind of like environments, those professional setups. But you find out who's who in those kind of professional setups as well. You know, people that are going to be for you, going to be against you. It then becomes a bit of a kind of like competition. Well, you've not mentioned to me, and you've not done this. And I thought, wow, you know, why can't we all just work along? You know, why can't we all just get along and just work along? So it was, you know, that was kind of my journey right through up to working for Richardson's, you know, now coming into Richardson Sport.
And for people that don't know, like you got all sorts of Premier League players, international players coming to see you now. Like every time someone signs for one of the top clubs, especially in the Manchester area, I'm like, they're going to end up working with Wayne. But on that though, reputation is something that I wanted to talk about, because you've just mentioned there 2010. So we're talking 11 years as we record this that Richardson Sport's been running. And people need to be aware of that. It's been 11 years of hard work of building this reputation. But I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast. I speak to a lot of people, especially in the Manchester area, but in football in general, they know that Wayne works with footballers. Those two things go together, because there's a reputation there that has been developed over years. And this is people that aren't involved in football, like it could just be anyone in the city. Like people know about you and what you do. And the thing I wanted to pick at that is some advice from you, because we'll have a number of listeners that are either starting out on the journey, coming through university, aspiring to be somewhere near where you're at right now, or there might be people that have set up their own businesses that are maybe going through that initial struggle of trying to get attracted by players, and you know what it's like. So what would you say in terms of advice for people and coaches to build that reputation so people know exactly what they do and the impact they can have?
I think things like this, Ben, these platforms are very well needed. And I think what you're doing is integral in terms of like the things that you set up around the country, because the more people that know about it, the better. And I've been on probably about 2 or 3 of them and realized I've networked, and I still keep in contact with those people and just network. You don't have to, it doesn't have to always be kind of like a sports science issue or S&C issue. Get to know people. Get to, you know, if you go into a situation, you get to know, network with people. It doesn't have to be in kind of in that environment. a prime example of that is a very close friend of mine, which one of your kind of colleagues goes to. He's very much a barber, and he very much like has these players coming in all the time, or as agents and everything. And I've had that ability to kind of sit down and talk to a lot of the agents while they're in the chair, because it's like that barber chair all the time, like having a taxi driver or a barber chair. They're always going to talk. The taxi driver's always going to talk to the passenger. The barber's always going to talk to the person that's in the chair. And everyone always gets that point, Ben, where they like to talk about themselves. Do you know what I mean? What do you do? What are you up to? And everything like that. And so I spent about nearly 2 years in my friend's shop saying, this is where I'm based. This is what I do. This is, how I can possibly help some of your clients. And quickly, it then started to build up. So a prime example of that is that, Ben, I was on my way home. The first time that we had one of our major clients, we were on our way home. And my partner, she said to me, what time are you coming back? And I said, look, I'm on the M62 now. And then I got a call from my friend who's a barber, and he said to me, listen, turn your car back around. There's an address here. You need to go and see this person right now. And I just said, look, my missus has just started dinner, and we've got something to do and everything. She'll have the backside. He said, no, listen, you need to turn the car around. And it was like the first major person I dealt with, Ben. Anyway, when I got there, I got to the area where he lived. We lived in Wilmslow, and then I got there and there's cameras and everything around the house at the time. And she said, where are you? I said, I'm in Wilmslow. She said, yeah, I've just seen the car on Sky Sports News pulling into this area. And I went in, Ben, and it was so funny because when I drove in, I got shown into this house. It was a massive house, and it was a certain Premier League player. But the agent was, at the time, it was Mino Raiola. So I'm sat there, Ben, round this table talking to Mino Raiola, this player and his advisor. And he said to me, listen, there's been a situation. We want your help. And I'm like, me? And it's like my first major kind of thing. All because what I did was, Ben, just network with different people, just spoke to them. Not, this is what I do. I'm the best at anything. Just say, listen, if you need any help, I'm around at the time. And those are the kind of things, Ben, that you have to do. Your groundwork, putting in that. A lot of people, some people, volunteering, we take it for granted. I spent nearly 6 years at Man City volunteering, not getting paid, volunteering. And it was something else. And those things are very, very kind of like underutilized now, because we live in a fast world now where a lot of the students have gone to university, they've amassed this amount of debt. Then it's coming out there where in the past we've had opportunities, I've had jobs where I've been at clubs and like £12,000. And you think, wow. So I said, okay, well, how are you going to kind of like build up your reputation? What are you going to do next? How are you going to wait for things to come to you? You're going to go out and look for it. What are you going to do next? And it's giving them kind of opportunities where we spend most of our time, Ben, taking in emails from people, even up to PhD standard, that basically, look, Wayne, I'm in a bit of a dilemma. I want to work with players. I want to work with different people. And I said, right, okay, well, what are you doing to kind of achieve that? Where are you going? Who are you networking? Have you spoken to Federation Football Fit? Have you been on LinkedIn? Have you communicated with people? What do? You know what I mean? You're not in that kind of like area where you're going to be testing like for force plates and things like that as well. You've got to network at some point. You have to talk. You have to talk at some point. So what are you doing to achieve that? And 9 times out of 10, most of them turn around and go, well, I'm a scientist. I don't really deal with that. I don't deal with this. And, someone's asked me to do some work with him, but I don't know how to price this up. And I said, that's the whole point of business. At some point, you're going to have to do this. So let's walk through it so you can understand what's going on. And that reputation, I always said, Ben, that I would always, at some point, no matter how successful I was, I would always come back and help someone. I would always come back and help the next person. I will always open the door for someone. I've had negatives and I've had positives. But I will always try and support the next generation, and it's tough starting out. But at the same time, how can I help? And that's how I set out, and that's building that reputation.
Yeah, 100%. And it is one of those that I think people take for granted, don't they? And this is probably partially down to social media. It's maybe a negative side of social media, because the positive is that we get to see you working with player X, Y, and Z. We get to an insight into how they prepare for a game, or how they train behind the scenes. But at the same time, people can look at you as a business and go, oh, I want to do that. I want that within a couple of months. And you're like, no, listen to what you're saying. I've been running for 11 years. It's taken 11 years of...
The thing about it as well, right? I've had so many coaches that have come in that have gone on and done very, very well. And, I still get like messages from umpteen coaches, Wayne, I wouldn't know where I was without you. And I said, because you know what? The greatest thing, Ben, that you can give someone is your time. It's the greatest thing ever you can give them is your time, not because of what you know and you're the expert. Just listen, Wayne, I'm a bit of a problem. I'm going through an issue. I'm working at a football club. I'm going for an interview. How do I need to go through this as well? Okay, have you taken your notes? Do you know anyone there? Could you then spend a day with like a team, which what I did when I was at City, because I asked that question to a lot of the backroom team. If you had the budget and we didn't have to deal with the stakeholders, what would your kind of like prime example of your kind of physiotherapy department or S&C department or the sports scientist department, what would it look like? And they'll come back to me and go, Wayne, you know what, that information there, you were exactly right. I had someone 2 weeks ago and he came to me and said, Wayne, I've turned down the job at a Premier League club because what they were offering me and my experience and where I've been in the first team, there was no comparison. And the best thing, you don't have to say yes to everybody, Ben. It's the saying no to some people and just knowing your worth, knowing what you're worth and knowing that at some point it's going to take time to build up. But the best thing to do is ask questions and try and find out. If you're not sure, do your research and find out. And we always want, like you said, Ben, that quick fix solution. That quick fix, social media, it looks great. It looks fantastic. Someone's doing better than me. But okay, how did you get there then? It's not like, and I've had so many coaches, Ben, recently that I tried to help and then I've gone away working with a player abroad and they've come in and tried to set up at the same place as me.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, wow, I've just gotten your DRB. You didn't know anything about your DRB. You didn't know anything about tax or accountants or anything like that as well. It's just that you feel because of your qualifications and because of who you are, you feel that you're better, and it's difficult, but you learn from it.
I think if we went into all the struggles behind the scenes, it would have to be a full few hours of a podcast, wouldn't it? Because as a business owner, there's an endless list, isn't there? And things that you don't even think about crop up all the time. And I say that because that's what people that look at what you do probably think like, oh, I'll go in and do that. But not even realizing there's everything else that goes on behind the scenes and all the sort of battles and struggles that you've faced along the way. Well, the other thing I was going to touch on is that draw of consultancy, because we'll know loads of coaches that are involved in full-time football that are really happy about what they're doing. They're really happy in their roles, the clubs they're at, the way the clubs are set up, the coaches they're surrounded by. They're in great positions. I could list a whole name of them, a whole list of them right now. But there's also a big draw at the moment, I think, in particular, towards consultancy, isn't there?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
What's your views on that? Because you're talking as an experienced coach, but I think this is just my opinion. The draw of consultancy is coming from less experienced coaches now that probably haven't had the time in the trenches working with players, and they think they can go and set up by themselves. I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you've hit the nail right on the head, Ben. In terms of like people going into it and going in there blind and thinking what I can do is I can just set up at a local gym or somewhere, like a track or something and set that up. And we get inundated with people. You've got like the likes of the Shane Murphys of this world and the John Noonans who are setting up mentoring projects and stuff as well at the moment, which are really, really good. And it's quite in depth. And I think the best thing to do for a young coach is to maybe go through a mentoring project as well with an experienced coach to kind of guide them through that as well before they then go into it. So I've seen coaches that have set up, and you always say that your biggest thing is your year, that 1 year where you're going to leave and try and get some consultancy work or do something. Yes, if you can go in somewhere and you can gain some experience, and even in another sport, that's fantastic. But don't feel that it's going to come to you straight away, because certain things are going to take time. They're going to take time to build. You're going to have to find a place that you're going to have a great relationship with. Then you're going to have a situation where you're going to try and get business in. Communications with the clubs and the players. Do you speak to the agents? Do you speak to the players themselves? And these are the tests. These are the major tests that you then basically have as a consultant to try, because you're not just doing one thing. So they think, well, what I can do is I can just train them. But then when they have to go to a meeting and then start discussing things, it's like, well, hang on a minute, I don't know anything about this. And that's why mentors nowadays, like John Noonan's and Shane are really worth the weight in gold, in terms of like what they're doing. Can you have that on a regular basis where am I actually doing the right thing? Am I approaching it? But not only that, then you're either a businessman or a businesswoman. You have to be a business person now, not just the scientist or the conditioning coach. So the consultancy thing is really, really tough. If you go into it with your eyes closed, get the right information, speak to the right people, get a mentor, talk to them, and then at least then they'll guide you in terms of the right path.
Well, you just told a story before as well about sacrifice. Like when you were on the way home to your missus, you get the call. Like you have to be willing to make those sacrifices as well, don't you? And when people talk about work-life balance, that's probably a whole different topic. But there is I know that you've made a number of sacrifices along the way in order to succeed. So people have to be willing to do that as well, don't they?
Yeah, plus, I mean, on the road, like you think about it, sometimes during the transfer window, you're getting at 6:30 and you're on your way home, so you see your family in the morning when you're leaving, and then you don't see them again because everybody's in bed. It's that thing, and sometimes I've been frightened, Ben, that I'm going to come home to an empty home. It's lucky that I've got a relationship with my partner where after 11 years she understands what I do, but it's that sacrifice, making all those long hours. Are you prepared to then do them long hours? Are you prepared to then sit down and someone will ring you up and say, listen, I've got a problem, I need to speak to you. 11, which I'll touch on later on, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, parents ringing you up saying, my son, daughter's been released by a club we don't know. He's locked himself in his bedroom. She's locked himself in the bedroom, don't want to talk. And it's like you're picking up the phone. It's like that 24-hour Citizens Advice Bureau, and you think to yourself, wow, is this what my job's about? I only set out to be a conditioning coach or a sports scientist. And now I find out that it's so vast in terms of like the direction that, you're like an octopus, you're getting pulled from pillar to post. Can you be here at this time? Can you be in London? Okay, then I've got a slot tomorrow, London, be there for 10 o'clock. That means we're working with a top agency. Can you be there for 10 o'clock in the morning? Now you're having to change your diary, change, everything else, then sort out childcare and sort out everything else and then be there because that work might guarantee you work for the next, it's not just the here and now, it could be long term, building a reputation and networking with different people from different parts of the country. So I think that's important, are you prepared or are your listeners prepared to make those sacrifices when times get tough? Are you prepared not just to stay in the right area and then go somewhere else as well? So it is very, very tough, Ben, trying to do all of that.
And you just touched on a really interesting area, like the evolution of your role, because going from sports scientist to S&C coach to business owner to you'd probably agree, like more mentor now to coaches, to players, as well as doing all the S&C and sports science as well. It's a really interesting sort of path, isn't it? And something that I'm just putting words in your mouth, but maybe something that you're not set out to do initially, but it's the way that things transition, isn't it?
And, sometimes it's going to be situations where we all set out to be, to have that role, most of your listeners to be that sports scientist or that fitness coach or whatever the case may be. And sometimes them journeys are going to take you onto different kind of pathways. So there was a situation where I went to working with a youth support team, which was partly run by Manchester City Council and Greater Manchester Police. And it was a 5-year project. And part of that was going into police stations and speaking to young kids that were involved in crime. And I always remember, Ben, that there was one guy there in particular who was 14 and a father of 3 at 14 years old. An ex-talented footballer that had been in an academy, but you wouldn't have thought he was 14, but he'd been in crime. And you might say to yourself, well, what's this got to do with what I'm doing and one thing after another? What I'm trying to say is that sometimes those kind of conversations and those kind of things prepare you for what's to come. You know what I mean? It's a test. And nothing doesn't faze me now when I hear things, from like academy players and, different things where, they've got the girlfriend's pregnant or something's happened and you haven't sit down, they're not told, and the parents, they're telling you what you still have to do because it's a child protection issue or something. You have to be that child protection, you have to be that mentor, you have to be that, that father, you have to be all those things. And you think to yourself, wow, I only set out my role to be a sports scientist, conditioning coach. And then what I'm finding out is now that I'm all these things now, thinking, wow, sometimes I have to come down. Sometimes, Ben, I cry my eyes out.
Yeah.
Not because of the situation of like how it is, but some of the things that people tell you and what they're involved in and what they do, you know, and you think, wow, I've just watched you on the TV and you're playing, and all of a sudden you ring me away and I've got a problem. I've not spoken to the manager. I need to come in and have a chat with you because you're that kind of impartial, you're in that impartial view. So there's so many different roles with that. And you kind of like your audience have to kind of understand that you're not always going to be in one role, because there's going to be a situation where you're going to sit down and you're going to talk to somebody that you've been helping through whether rehab or S&C or sports science, and that person is going to confide in you because you may be the only outlet out.
Yeah.
You know, so it's roles are quite vast in terms of what you do.
And that's where it comes to forgetting that we're dealing with footballers and that we're actually dealing with people, isn't it? Like when you've got people coming to see you, you're not just talking about squat mechanics, about the way they lunge and things like that. That's probably one of the last things you're talking about. You're talking to a person, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you know, like two things, you know, I'm saying about like players and stuff as well. Two things that really, really sprung to mind for me was a player now that's at a German club, moved from a Premier League club to a German club, and this particular player didn't have anything. He didn't have no kind of like support mechanism. Didn't have anything. He was kind of result to handouts, and then made a massive move to the Bundesliga, and he's doing fantastically well now. But at the beginning, it was a case of I haven't got no trainers to train in. My parents basically would bring me on. His sister would bring me on the bus. The minute when he then started kind of making some form of inroads, and we were doing some mentoring with him because he was on the verge of getting kicked out of the football club. So we did some mentoring with him and just said, listen, you know, this is the process. Go in and speak to the club. This is what you need to do. This is how you conduct yourself. This is how you behave. And the parents and the sister was all for that. Roll on then 2 years after doing all this work with him, the sister then has her head turned by an agent. And he now starts going, because he's now playing in the first team, doing very, very well, gets his move for a lot of money. And then they now start turning up with a brand new Mercedes A-Class. They start wearing Gucci, they start wearing all different things and all that. And you think to yourself, wow, you can see that evolution of like where you were useful at one point. And all of a sudden, as soon as then kind of money then starts coming into it, it then starts to change the dynamics of that particular person, because then all of a sudden you've got all these people around them and you can't even get near them. Yeah. And at one point, you speak to them on a regular basis and you can't even speak to them now because you have to speak to that person. I'm the guy that sorts out his transport. I'm the guy that sorts this out. And it's really, really tough. But then on the other side, Ben, you then have players that will come to you that you then get referrals. And this particular player that I worked with, he was referred to me from an academy director, and he said, well, if you can get him fit and you can look after him, you can do working magic with him, he'll be a fantastic player, and I can offer him a trial at this Premier League club. And Ben, I spent about nearly, a couple of sessions with him, 2 hours. And one particular day he rang me and he said to me, listen, I need to come in and talk to you. And I said, listen, what is everything all right? He said, I'd rather speak to you face. And when I went in, Ben, and I spoke to him, he sat down at Platt Lane at the time and he said, listen, there's a situation that my partner's pregnant. And I said to him, I said, okay. I said, congratulations, I've got a daughter. And, he said, well, I would be happy, but I've just realised, she just told me today that it's not mine, I've had an affair. Mm-hmm. And I'm, wow, okay. And I sat down there, Ben, right? I mean, we're talking, forget about training now. It's about the person. 2.5 hours. He went home, Ben. Sorry, man. He went home and he committed suicide. And I was the last person, Ben, that he spoke to. I was the last person that he spoke to, right? And it hit me for six, because I said, what could I have done to kind of like, what can I have done to help? And I was blaming myself for a lot of the time, and I knew from that day, Ben, when that happened, I knew that this, Richardson sport part of that process, was just kind of like help players that were going through this, even pre-lockdown. This was happening, pre-lockdown, before lockdown. And I sat down there and he took his own life. And I was getting more kind of like communication from different people who were going through like different kind of aspects of their life in terms of like being released from clubs and all that kind of stuff. And it became like this very much like this happening around thing, where I went down and talked to them, you know, like this thing. And I knew from that day that there was a purpose. It was a bit of a calling, and it was a bit of a purpose to try and support the next, you know, like people around there, whether it's men, women, boys, girls, whatever. There's things that you can't deal with that you have to post on, and you have to be mindful of that. But at the same time, when setting up Richardson Sport, one of the key things for me was, how am I going to support the next generation in terms of, it's not about training, but it's the whole aspect, it's the whole holistic approach.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, I'm sure many people can't resonate with that to that level, because like, hopefully that hasn't been a regular occurrence, but I know that it's something that you post about a lot now, isn't it? The whole mental health side of support, and whatever role we're in, dealing with, again, forgetting that the football is dealing with people. Like, we talk about soft skills and it's probably a bit fluffy and we don't really understand fully what it is, but the fact that you're having conversations with people, and vulnerable people as well, in these situations, regardless of their age as well, like it doesn't matter, does it? It just depends on circumstances. Like, you're going to come across conversations like this, and again, it might be someone at a club, you might be a consultant working privately with players. Like, I hope that just sort of, yeah, I'm sure it will, it hits home that these are the things that you have to be wary of, and I don't know if you can be ready, but you have to be aware of that this sort of stuff happens.
Yeah, and you have to be that very much like that listener.
Yeah.
Part of you know, it's not just about how good you are in terms of like, you know, doing data and doing testing and doing everything else that comes with it as well. You have to be that listener. You have to be pragmatic. You have to sit down and be willing to kind of give it the time and talk to people and stuff as well. Players sometimes, when they then get injured, are probably at the most vulnerable, because they're thinking so many different things. Am I going to be back in the squad? I'm out of sight, out of mind. The manager's not spoken to me. All that kind of stuff as well. It's been kicked to the side. So you're kind of like their support mechanism while they're in that kind of that gym environment and doing the rehab setting as well as the physios and all the staff that are really there as well. When they actually come in and do some extra work with you, a lot of the players then start kind of talking about different issues, different problems, what they're going through. And also what you got to remember is with that as well, it's about confidentiality, you know, because you could release so many things. I could write a book about so many different people and doing stuff. But the way that you build up, like you mentioned previously before, Ben, about reputation, is then having that confidentiality. We've been approached by many agents and many people, and they've said to me, Wayne, listen, you bring a player to us, this is what it's worth to you. And I said, no, because you know why? Because it's taken me a long time to build up a reputation. Years to build, seconds to lose. And if I then end up going and doing something like that, you know, but it could be worth a lot of money to you. And I said, no, because you have to be honourable, but at the same time, you have to be supportive and knowing that that person's come to you with something to try and help them. So, you know, and, you know, the thing that they've come to you, I am honoured when people come to me, no matter whether they're grassroots or Premier League players. So I always try and listen, Ben, and be supportive, but at the same time, this for you kind of like your audience, this is a bigger thing, you know, if you're going into it, be mindful that there's other things rather than just being involved in the S&C Sports Science game.
Because it comes down to the reason that they choose you, doesn't it? Because you've already mentioned a few other people out there that work in that similar sort of space that are doing an amazing job in terms of Shane and John, but there's many, many other people now going into the consultancy side of things, setting up businesses, so that there's a lot of choice out there.
Yeah.
But standing out in that crowd is what you guys essentially are doing, because of the work you're doing, but also because of the relationships that you build with the players. And I'd probably argue, again, my perspective, my point of view, that is probably more of a reason that people would seek out people like yourself than the technical side, because they know they can come, they can get that support from you, as well as all the quality support they get in terms of the physical support as well.
Yeah, I would say, Ben, that is, if there's things that I don't know, I will find out.
Yeah.
But I have people there that I can post onto. I will not be afraid to put my hand up and say, listen, this is beyond me. Let me just go and get somebody who knows what they're talking about, right? And it's like the communication with the club. We've had many times where football clubs have come to us and said to us, what are you doing with our athlete? What are you doing? You know, you're doing this, and we've done this, and we've done that. And I've gone, no problem. First of all, good afternoon. you know, if you want to come in and sit down and have a chat, and I'll send you an email and one thing after another. I've had it on many occasions, and when they've come in, it's been a completely different conversation. We will never ever obviously fight against the club, you know, because the club, you know, ultimately that's who you play for. They pay you wages and all that kind of stuff as well. We're just a support mechanism, you know. We're just that support mechanism, and I know that it's becoming more kind of the thing now where a lot of people have that support outside of the club as well. But you have to be mindful that when prime example, I remember working with a player from Stoke. I remember speaking to the head physio there, and he said to me, "Wayne, listen, it's fantastic work that you're doing, but do me a favour. If there's anything there that you're going to implement that's something different away from our program, please get in contact with me and keep me informed." And I just thought that was, you know, I've had it at Sheffield United, I've had it at Sheffield Wednesday, I've had it at Bolton, I've had it at different clubs, Everton, Manchester United, where they've gone, "Wayne, this is the program. Could you just make sure he follows this, or he or she follows this program?" And go, "Not a problem at all." And I like that, and that's communication between, you know, because that's what you have to do, communicate with the clubs. But for me, it's a case of, it's not about me. This is what I do, and it's the best thing, and this is a situation, not a chance. Follow the program, communicate with the club so everyone knows what they're doing. We're all singing towards the same sheet. During the off season, it'll be obviously completely different because you can spend a bit more quality time with them. But then during in season, they might want to come in and touch on things that they don't really spend much time on. So we've been able to give do that, but still advise with the club as well. So it's been really, really good for us.
And that transparency is the key, isn't it? Because that's probably where clubs get really frustrated, is that like practitioners will take players and they'll work on things and not be transparent and not share the work that they're doing, or step away from the program, and it just becomes a bit of a mess in terms of monitoring load and being aware of what the players are doing. And they might say, "Oh no, I did this the other day," and they say, "Well, we didn't know about that." So yeah, of course, that transparency is key, isn't it, with the club?
Yeah, we say for instance, when Igalo came to Man United, we were quite fortunate because the deal then was done like 10:59, and by about 12:30, I got a call from China, just funny number. I just thought, you know, what's his number? And it was the agent ringing me saying, "Wayne, can you set up a training program for him? He's going to come down. We've got like 2 weeks of a window." But United were going to Marbella at the time. And so the agent brought him in. He came in. He flew in over the weekend, and then on the Monday he was there, and we were doing like sessions with him, and we were working around the clock with him to get him prepared for obviously his United debut, which was against Chelsea. But what was really, really pivotal and what was good, I was able to speak to a guy called Steve McNally, who's the doctor, who's like the head doctor there, and also a guy called Charlie Owen, who was I think he's the athletic development head of athletic development. And he actually said to me, "Look, Wayne, this is fantastic." I gave him a handover, all his GPS results when we were doing work outside, but then obviously the conditioning and what the major lifts were and what we did over them 2 weeks. And he sent me an email basically saying the handover's been perfect, because now we were in a position now to then carry on from there as well, because you've already set the groundwork for us. So I was really, really taken back by the email that they sent from Man United. But there's a lot of obviously things behind that. But at the same time, I was able to communicate with him on a regular basis. So for us, it was fantastic. It was keep in touch, you know, and it was great. And he went in and fantastic. And then all of a sudden, coronavirus hit. So it kind of stopped him in his tracks. But that communication alone for me was pivotal, because we were able to talk and put everything. And I was able to email and send him across all these bits of information moving forward.
And again, we started off talking about reputation, but this is how it's built, isn't it? Because the initial reputation that you built working with players and doing all those early years graft was one thing. But the other thing, like you said before, it can be destroyed in a second if you don't act right. And this is the ways of acting right, isn't it? The transparency, the having conversations with people, being open and honest with the clubs. And all that means is when you get people from the same club or come across that practitioner in the future, they're going to look at you in the right light, aren't they? They're not going to be like, "Oh no, Wayne's just a pain. He gets in the way," and all the rest of it. They're going to encourage it because of the work that you've done.
Yeah, there was a guy at Sheffield. I want to say this. There's a guy at Sheffield Wednesday called Keith Mcgrath. Really, really good guy. And he basically, I was working with a player during the off season, and he sent me all the information about this player, because this player, I think he had a really bad hamstring tear, and he had an operation on his hamstring tear. And he was able to kind of send me all this information. But he said, "Wayne, what they've got to do, these players, they've got to send me like what they're doing during the off season as well, but stick to our program. So I was able to give them kind of like very much like video shots of obviously the sessions, but also getting them to follow the program as well. That would have been prescribed by obviously by the sports scientists and the head of physiotherapy. And then what I did was at the end of like probably the week, I just sent him basically a block of shots from Dartfish, sent him a load of stuff, sent him all the information, sent him a report, and he was like, Wayne, this is fantastic. This is music to our ears. So by the time when he went back in, it was quite easy to reintegrate him back into doing pre-season work because he was ready for the pre-season then. And he said that, and hopefully, he's gone in there with, injury free, but the operation that he had was a major operation. Anything could happen during the course of pre-season if it's not monitored right. And it's about that monitoring, load and what you're then doing and not building up too much too soon. Most of the players nowadays get involved with technical coaches, Ben, but you have to be careful with that as well, because what some of the technical coaches don't seem to understand that it's very much like you're still doing load, you're still loading up, you're still running, there's still that fatigue element, still everything else that goes with it. And you have to kind of, when they come in and see you then later on, if they've had double sessions, you have to kind of say, well, we're not going to do that, especially if we just do some active recovery or, just go on the watt bike, for half an hour and just do some like flexibility and mobility. Just let's not kind of load up too much too soon, or let's not do anything stupid here, because when you then go back in, anything could potentially happen. And then where they say, well, what have you done previously? Who have you worked with? I've worked with Wayne from Richardson Sport and I've worked with this guy. They're not going to look at the other guy, they're going to look at you. So that's why it's important trying to monitor and trying to speak to these guys and have a good relationship with them.
Because you mentioned before that we're all support coaches, aren't we? Regardless of what your official role says, we're all support coaches to support the player to perform on the pitch. And if everyone's pulling in different directions and doing their own bits, then it doesn't get them anywhere, does it? Like the club could be doing one thing, you could have an S&C doing something else, a private technical coach doing something else, a private physio doing something else. It could all just be a mess, can't it? Whereas when it works right, and I'm sure you've seen times that it has and the times that it hasn't, it's efficient, isn't it? It's efficient, and it gives the club and it gives the players what they need.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I think that is the whole point, because everyone benefits out of it at some point. And, working with players, working with different people, but at the same time, I think communication is key, Ben. I think communication is key. And I would say, first and foremost, with any players that come in, before they actually come into the gym, who's the guy there that we need to speak to? Send him over information, if needs be. But also what I can do is I can always share my programs with that particular person if they need to see anything on there as well. So at least they can have a look and say, well, Wayne, that's great. That's not great. We can't do that at the moment because he's in this, at the moment we're in this program. So I try as much as I possibly can, Ben, to kind of like share that information as well. I have a very, very open, kind of like door, where people could come in and talk. It wasn't like that in the beginning. It was difficult at the beginning because people, the first thing that they say is, who are you? So you had to build that up from 2 or 3 people that have come in then, maybe from the same team, or someone might have worked with someone before. So I've had to build that up, but at the same time, it's difficult because if someone's never met you before, it's like, right, okay, what I'll do is I'll send all this information, I'll send it across, at least they can see what's going on, rather than me trying to implement all these things and then working against the club, and then the player benefits. The player might say, I want to come in and work with you, Wayne, but no, you don't work, you don't play for me, you don't, you even have to mentor the player and say, listen, just go in, this is what's expected of you, this is what you have to do, and just follow it, follow it. So yeah, it is difficult. It's trying to find that fine line.
And when coaches have built a bit of experience and they're gathering that reputation, and one thing that I've spoken to a lot of people about is value. And you've mentioned it before, like knowing your worth, knowing your value. And we don't have to talk, obviously, in terms of numbers, in terms of how much you're charging, all that sort of stuff. But where would you direct people? Like, what's the advice for you to give to coaches? Because when they're setting up privately, I've spoken to coaches that have won World Cups, and I'll ask them like how much it is to get them involved on a bit of work, and they don't know. They don't know the value. So, and this is people at any stage of the career, really, isn't it? But how do you go about that? I'm not expecting like any sort of equation or anything, but your experiences on how you sort of developed it and how you know your worth.
So I mean, I'll give you two examples. Then one of them was a coach recently that I know, and he was working with a Premier League player, and he's been involved in working for like another governing body, in a different sport. But he's working in a different sport, but he's working with a particular footballer. And his words to me at that time was, "Wayne, I need your help. This is an experienced coach. I need your help. I don't know how to price this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to put this into perspective. I've never done all this kind of like consultancy before. I need your help." And I was like, "Right, okay. So you're the coach. What do you have to do? Have you had a meeting with the player?" "No, I've not had a meeting with the player." "Okay, so we need to find out what the player needs and wants and stuff as well, and what period of time. How long have we got, and what budget have you got?" Because usually it comes from the player. Either the agent will say, "Yeah, it's not a problem at all," because what's the cost of getting it wrong? Then you've then got to travel. Then you've got to look at how much of your remit, how you're going to get out there. So your travel is one of the key things. It's not about the session. You may have to travel. You might have to travel to London. You might have to travel across the other side of the globe. It doesn't really matter where, so you've got to keep that into factor. So you've got to look at very much the time element. Then when you then get there, everything else is easy because then you're going to deliver the session. But what some people feel then sometimes is when you then go into it, it's like, "Well, I'm paying you for the session. Travel won't come into it." You think, well, yeah, of course it does, because it's my time. I still have to get there, and then I have to deliver the session. Then I'm getting back at the same time. Why is it so expensive? Or why is it, and you'll see that with a lot of people, especially. So what I'm saying to a lot of people starting out is, when you know your worth, you've got to sit down and keep and put that into a factor. First of all, find out about the player, find out how long, over what period, find out where you've got to travel. There's so much research and things that you have to then do moving forward before you then start pricing it up. And then when you then when you put it all together, it's like, wow, travel, sessions, time, writing the programs, maybe game attendance as well, which is a big one. You've got to see how you might then get that from Huddle or some form of kind of data, data performance analysis, something. But it's all those things that and then you can then be in a position then to put everything together, then price your sessions accordingly. You know what I mean? It's not just about them coming through the door, it's about everything that comes with it then as well. The whole kind of like thing. How much time have you spent with them? How many times of the week do they want you in? Do they want you to come to games? It may be a flexibility, it may be the amount of gyms at the homes where they want you to come to the homes or something like that as well. There's a lot of things to consider then. There's a lot of things to consider moving forward.
What I'd say on it as well, Wayne, is something you've mentioned before. The time it takes to travel, the time it takes to do programs, and all the time that's taken from you is time away from your daughter, away from your wife. Like, it's personal time taken away from you, isn't it? So I think that's what people have to consider, is that is your time, and your time is valuable. And we're not going to talk about prices or anything like that, but that's what you've got to consider. You've got to consider the travel time and everything that it takes is taken away from what you're going to be doing otherwise.
So we have a Premier League player, and he's fine, but it's obviously the people around him. And they said, "We want you, Wayne. We want you for the season." Okay, I said, "Well, where do first of all, having a meeting with him. Where does he live? What, how long, what time, where do we have to go? All that kind of stuff, writing the programs, making sure that they're doing that, then what game attendance." And I thought, okay, no problem. So once I've kind of priced everything up then, and then I've sent it to them, he was like, he came in one day and he said to me, "This invoice you've given me, you give me this invoice. We're not paying that. We're not paying that. No, and I said, okay. I said, invoice. I said, "Oh, you mean the proposal?" So I said, "Do you know about the proposal?" "What do you mean?" "Well, the idea is you take things out, you keep things that you want, and you take things out that you don't want, and then we revise the price." "Well, why is it taking you so long?" I said, "Well, that's how long it's going to take me to get there, and then I've got to go home. So you want the session that happens 9 at night, then I've got to drive back to Leeds. I'm getting back there, for probably about 1 p.m, 12:30, 1 p.m. So what do I, so then you want me to work on Sunday, and that's the only time when I get off, and that's the only time I get with my family. So what about me?" So there has to be that work-life balance, you know what I mean, and kind of working it out where what is useful and what is not useful, and is it worth your while? Know your worth. Is it worth your while? If it's not worth your while, yes, we can gain experience from it then, but at the same time, you've got to know your worth. work everything out first, and then you work out the aims, the objectives, and what happens next. And once you priced it up, and then you presented that proposal to them, that's the initial bit. Don't be in a rush to kind of like send them up because it's a latest Premier League player or player playing out in the WSL, and you want to be the thing, and they're going to be paying you with Instagram vouchers. It doesn't work that way. Do you know what I mean? This is what it is. This is the real world. We all have to survive and do that. We all love doing what we do, and that's why we run things like this. But at the same time, you've got to know your worth. You've got to know all that graft that you've been doing, the degrees, the masters, if you go into PhDs and stuff as well. It ultimately comes down to someone saying, I want you, but I don't want to pay for it. Yeah. Or I want you, and I ain't going to pay for it, and you're going to be with me for a length of time, and that's fantastic. And that's the difficult thing then.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And it's something that otherwise you're going to end up working ridiculous hours and not getting paid much. And it's something that we spoke about before, that when people are ending up in jobs at clubs in these lowly paid positions, if consultancy is a reason for coming away from that, which I'm not saying it is for everyone, but it might be for a majority of people, you're ending up in the same position. And I know Rob Pace is doing some great work on surveying coaches. And I know he's got some stuff coming out on like working hours and things like that. And I look at it and it scares the hell out of me, because I'm like, I cannot believe coaches are going through through weeks like that. Like,
but the fact of the matter is, people will do it.
Yeah.
They will. Listen, let's not kind of dismiss this. I would have done it.
Yeah.
I would have done it. Back then, someone said to me, you're going to work part-time at Man United. And I thought, my first job, this is fantastic. But I know for a fact that that person who was kind of heading up that team was in no position then to offer me that job, because he was just an employee like everybody else. So I would have done anything. I would have worked for nothing just to work at Man United at that time. So when someone's offering you now £12,000 or £15,000, you think to yourself, well, I had a job at Crewe, well then I've got to move to Hull. Then I've got to have a relocation budget. Do you know anything about relocation budgets? No, I didn't kind of put that into my interview. Well, we've got to move. We've got to move some relocation budget. So that's in their budget. They've just offered you a flat wage, and they tried to even come down from that flat wage as well. That flat wage. So what does that say about you? But then you're expected to go in and deliver all these things, work with the academy, come home late at night, get back from, you might be then playing in London, where you're then having to then travel down, and then you're coming back 2-3 o'clock in the morning, but then still expected to be at work at 8:30 the next day. Do you know what I mean? Where's the value? There's no value then. There's no, you know what I mean? And that's why a lot of guys nowadays, when I'm speaking to a lot of the young coaches nowadays, that's what you have to take into account. Are you prepared to then do that? But make the sacrifices. But remember, this job, this S&C game is not well paid. And that's why when I looked at Rob Pace's kind of like that analysis about obviously the coaches, and it was a very, very good in-depth analysis of obviously the coaches and what the worth is and what they should be getting and what they are getting, and the reality, the harsh realities of the S&C game in football.
Yeah, and I think with that, because maybe I've contradicted myself, because we were talking about sacrifices before and being willing to take sacrifices and things like that. And then I've also talked about not working too many hours and things like that. So people might get a little bit confused on that. But I think the main thing with it is that it's going somewhere. Like, you're right. People take these jobs that are paying whatever wage they're paying, which is fine. You pick up your experience, but then you've got to have a plan to move on to something else and make it worth your while, haven't you? And again, knowing your worth. Like, that might be your worth for a short period of time. You pick up your experience and you either work through at that club, or you have an ambition of moving on, upskilling, moving on, and then whether it is working into another club and it's not obviously not all about money, but we have to know our worth, don't we? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got some really, really good coaches out there that are doing some fantastic work as well. And you can even see that on some of the social media stuff, or some of the things that they've been doing individually. And trying to kind of like, if they're doing programs or they're doing some like video things, footage and everything, and then they're still working at like a major football club, and if anything happens, at least then they say, well, this is what I've been doing, and a lot of the work has been really, really good. It's been highlighted, it could be on a particular subject, or it could be on a particular movement or something like that. So, and I've seen a lot of decent coaches do that, but then I then get inundated then every time about when I've been offered a job at a club, but they've only offered me £15,000 for the year. And you think to yourself, wow, well, how do you feel about it? Well, I need the experience, or I need this, and go, okay, well, you can do that, but then you've got to have a plan then moving forward. If you're going to go in there, most of the time, you know, I mean, you might be at home with your parents and stuff as well. Can you afford to take the hit for 2 years, but gain the experience and gain the knowledge? So we're not dismissing it, but at the same time, we've got to kind of get something out of it. Because if you then go for a job nowadays, as you know, Ben, with mostly obviously with most of your listeners, if you then go for a job and then they turn around and say, well, what experience have you done? Where have you worked? What have you done? You just come either fresh out of university, or I potentially might have only been working part-time in an academy 2-3 days a week, you know, and it's only 2 hours a day, you know. So it's a case of like, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You need the experience, you need the kind of like to gain some form of knowledge, but at the same time, do you then go for these jobs that are paying either between £12,000 and £15,000 a year?
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to dive into something with you, Wayne, because the whole other side of that job interview process is something that I've not experienced, but I know goes on all the time. And that is discrimination in different ways, shapes, forms, something that we spoke about and touched on the podcast previously. But you were talking earlier in the podcast about that interview that you went to, and I know it's something you're going to expand on as well in terms of your experience. And I think this is really, really key for listeners to hear as well. So do you want to go into that in terms of what you faced and the sort of experiences that you went through with that?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite fortunate because after being at City and being around there, I had a phone call from one of the coaches. He now works at Wigan, and I remember him ringing me and saying to me, Wayne, listen, there's a position at a job, a Premier League club, if you're interested. I've worked with the guy at the England under-21s. Go, you know, I've told him all about you. Go, you know, speak to him and stuff as well. Here's his number, here's his email address. So I emailed him and gave him a call and spoke to him. He was like, yeah, I've been expecting your call. I dropped him an email, several emails, and we were conversating. It was a formality, because you know how it was then back then. You know, some of the experienced guys and who will listen to this will know, you know, jobs in football were very, they weren't advertised. You know what I mean? It was always a job for the boys. You know what I mean? It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's like that in life in general, but football was very much like that. So I was quite lucky because then someone referred me. So I was able to go and have this interview. And I went down there and I prepared. The interview was in January, but I then got the notification in November. So I had 2 months to prepare this interview and talking about what would you do if you bring a player in for the first time into an academy setup. And it's practically what I'm doing now. And my dissertation was about the same thing as well, about the player, the journey, the pathway, when they get released, mental health, all of that as well. It was basically music to my ears, Ben. And I was like, oh, I've got something on that. I've got a dissertation on that. So I was able to kind of move a few things around. And Ben, I remember going in there, and there was the HR, head of human resources. There was the medical, head of medical, and there was the academy manager, who was this particular guy. And when I got there, they showed me through, and I remember knocking on the door. And I remember him opening the door, Ben, and he had his foot in between the door, like halfway. And he said, can I help you? And I said, I'm here for the interview. He said, what's your name? I said, Wayne Richardson. He said, just hang on a minute. So he went to the desk. He looked at my CV. He looked at my face. He looked at my CV. And then basically, Ben, there was no job. He said, you know, I see you worked for. He tried to conduct the interview at the front of the door. It was, I was laughing my head off, Ben. To be fair, I was laughing my head off. And I think the only reason why I got through is because the woman, it was the head of HR, was there. So they had to do it, you know, it was that kind of like, what now is that boom rule where they have to go through all. Yeah. I went through this interview, and it basically he was just looking and scribbling around. He wasn't really interested in asking any questions. I think it was the medical guy and obviously the HR that were asking questions. And I had to conduct this interview that was basically this journey from start to finish in an academy play, even when they go on and get the scholar or get the pro or they get released, what happens next, what's the exit strategies and everything like that. So it wasn't just about sports science and conditioning. And when I came out of it, he went, after the interview, just like, right, we'll let you know. Thanks very much. You've got to get home now, haven't you? Right, see ya. That was it. Done. Mm-hmm. I left there. And I thought to myself, wow, if this is what it's all about, you know what I mean? I'm always going to be against it. I'm going to be against I'm actually going to be against the wall. I'm going to have to work twice as hard as everybody else just to kind of get through that process of getting through the door.
Yeah.
So even when I had that experience, the qualifications, Ben, gone back to uni, got everything, worked with some top players, you know, at the time I was working at City, worked with some top players, all that kind of stuff. It didn't account for anything. Didn't account for anything. But I didn't see it, Ben, as like a negative. I always turn a negative into a positive. I always try and look at the bright side of it as well and thinking to myself, what can I do to pave the way for the next generation coming forward? What I do, Ben, is I offer black coaches or coaches coming through. It doesn't have to be black. It's not a black thing as well. But just from my experience of getting players, young coaches to come in and offer my experience and talk to them about some of the journeys. So I'm trying to pave the way for the next generation of saying to people, listen, education is key. Network with people as much as possible. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. If they're telling you, giving you excuses, just say to them, listen, I just want some feedback. Always ask for feedback. Do you know what I mean? And be polite and courteous and send them, if they're saying, if it's very short and crisp and straight to the point, this email, send them a courteous email back. Thanks very much for your time, much appreciated. And it's just those general things. And I've had it, Ben, I've had it all the time. I've had it with people, work with athletes, work with players, you know, and people have turned around and said, you know, who are you? You work out there, not interested, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just been so negative. But I've always tried to maintain that as a black man, but at the same time, as a person first. What would it be for me to be in that position? Or I've been in that position. But you know, and prime example, obviously before I finish on this one, was Middlesex University. And I was so grateful to them because they gave me an opportunity to then speak on a Zoom call to nearly 200 of their students. And it was so funny because they had people who'd done PhDs and people who had set up their coaching businesses. But I said to them at the time, this is real talk. This is what's going to happen. If you want to be in a situation like me, I'm going to tell you about my journey and about what happened. And then I remember, it was so funny, and I cried. The dean of the university, right, said, don't go away, I want to speak to you. And he said, this is amazing. We want to put this into a very much like a module. This is something that we've never done before. So I'm in the process of setting that module up, of helping the next generation. But 9 times out of 10 around Middlesex, it's 70% black and ethnic. So what they were saying is, we've got these black and ethnic, you know, Asians, you know, Pakistanis, whatever the case may be, around the area. Well, they aspire to be in positions like you, but don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So, guys, there's Federation Football Fitness, there's these little platforms, network with people, giving them little pointers, and they've got that Ben as a module. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, wow, on the back of my experiences. So, you know, it is difficult. Yeah. Will it go away anytime soon? Maybe, maybe not. It's something that's been going on for a length of time. People feel threatened, not only about, you know, about knowledge and about your experience, going into situations where it's negative and you've got to turn that into a positive, but not just seeing it as everyone's against me, it's a black thing and all that kind of stuff. It's not about that. You get the right qualifications, speak to the right people, network with the right people, and never give up. You know what I mean? That's my opinion. That's what I always say to a lot of the young coaches coming through.
And that's why it's so important to talk about, isn't it? And get your experiences and other coaches that have gone through something similar, get their experiences out there, because it will be so easy in that position as well. And I can't imagine the amount of coaches that have gone through something similar that it's just made them do the opposite and just completely step away from what they were pursuing because they're not getting a fair crack at things. So you've obviously flipped it and turned it into that positive, but how many coaches out there already have gonna not have done that? And that's a scary thing.
So many people that have come in with work experience, Ben, and they're doing something completely different. I was looking at a guy on LinkedIn, he's gone into DJing. DJing. He's gone and masters. He's done his masters. I said, what happened? I said, just out of curiosity, what happened? He said, I wasn't really, you know, it didn't really happen for me. And he just gave up. You know, what's that like? Nearly 5 years of university, and you know, that was it. It's all over. It was done. And I said to him, but one interview, I said, don't let one situation define your career. Look at it long term. Sometimes you got to stick at it, you got to work at it, but we're living in a different generation, Ben. Well, I've come from obviously an older generation where nowadays, you say it's the thing of social media and what it portrays and it looks good and all that kind of stuff. And some people are not willing to work hard, at something. And I wanted it, Ben.
Yeah.
I wanted it so bad. You know what I mean? And, sometimes you've got to lose to win.
Yeah.
And I've lost so many times. Do you know what I mean? And I've had to gain that experience, but asking questions. And I'm still asking questions now, and I'm still learning and still want to learn. I spend most of my time at GB Taekwondo, you know what I mean? I'm looking at two of the coaches there and looking at what they do and, all that kind of stuff as well. And I'm thinking, what can I learn and how can I greet people? And unfortunately, you know what I mean, giving this information back to young coaches, it's like, they do it or they don't do it. So it's quite sad.
No, it is, but I honestly think it just needs people like yourself. It needs more awareness, doesn't it, of your experiences. And the more we can get these stories, these experiences out there to coaches, it gives them the reality of what it's like. Everything that we've touched on. And like, I appreciate how honest you've been on the podcast, Wayne, because I know we've spoke about a lot of this, like not recording it and you coming on and talking about all this sort of stuff. I hope it's really beneficial for people listening. And I really appreciate you talking about it. I've just realized we've gone over an hour, which is absolutely gone in a blink of an eye. I knew it would, but I wanted to try and just get some of these quick fire questions done just on the end of it as well.
Sure.
That we finish each podcast with, and then we'll get where people can look you up and keep an eye on what's going on at Richardson Sport as well. But first one, who are some of the biggest influences on your career?
4 people. A guy called Jim Cassell, who was at Man City, the academy director, who gave me that opportunity, that first opportunity. You always remember that person that gave me that first opportunity moving forward. He said to me, in 10 years' time, Wayne, when I set up Richardson Sport, after having it, because he'd written a book while he was in Dubai, in 10 years' time, what you're doing is going to be very, very sought after. I'm 11 years into it, and I've never been so grateful to him for his words, his kind words. Another guy called Mckenzie, who was he brought through players at the time from grassroots to professional football, who had been the manager at Hyde United and Winterford and lower league clubs, telling me how to deal with players and stuff as well. You're probably talking the best part of nearly 5,500 footballers he brought through, at levels, telling me how to deal with players and stuff as well, trials, what to go through and everything as well, and some of the things that he did. A guy called Billy Hughes, who was at Man City as well, who basically set up a truce between two rival gangs, and had this football game, but at the same time was very much like talent ID. Remember, all these roles that are coming into it now, like talent ID and being involved in kind of like sports science, it was unheard of then. Back then, people used to just do them for the sake of doing them. Yeah. So, so there was like him, and been around, had a chat with him, and things that he's set up and what he's done and everything. And he's been very influential to me, giving me the right advice and introducing me to the right people. And my partner, Emma Hughes, because if it wasn't for her, she's had to endure quite a lot in terms of this for me to kind of follow my dream. And, when she set this up, she's been integral and played a massive part in that as well. We always say behind every man is a successful woman. And she's been really, really good to me in terms of like giving up her time and minding our daughter when I've been away and doing stuff as well, and kind of like working with like some top end people. So I can't forget my partner and my wife to be. So she's done quite a lot of work behind the scenes.
Brilliant. And then next one, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
Being a good listener, Ben. Being a good listener and being open and honest to people and saying you can do it. And try to be supportive and try to find out first of all what the problem is and how it can help. So I think being a listener, I think the kind of like conditioning and the data and everything else is for me is secondary. Because in order for that player to come in or that athlete to come in, you've got to try and find out first of all what's going on in here. And if they're not right and they're not kind of up for what's going to go on, I would say, guys, do me a favor. You just need to go out the door, and I'm prepared to listen to you, but remember what you're then doing. So I think my biggest strength is very much like being a good listener, but then years of experience of obviously working with players and doing that. Nothing doesn't faze me, Ben. I'm always open, open and honest and kind of giving that feedback back. So yeah, being a good listener has been one of the best things for me.
Brilliant, great answer. And then final one, mate. Where do you do your learning now? Where's your CPD? I know you. Before COVID, we ran into each other on different courses and things like that. But what about now?
Obviously, people like Rob Pacey, listening to people like him, I love him to bits. You know what I mean? They just sent me some T-shirt with their thing on it and all that kind of stuff as well. But I get a lot out of that. John Noonan's of this world. You know what I mean? I love what John Noonan does. I spoke to him last night. I said, listen, I want to mention obviously you in this and the stuff as well. And he said, I don't know what for. And I said, because I take great inspiration out of people like yourself. Yeah. Shane Murphy, Hunter, Des Ryan, people like that as well, where I look at courses and go, oh, I can do that. I can do that in the middle of the night, it's fine, and I can set that up and CPD, because they're always doing something I think there's good football people there, and you understand what I go through. If I'm going to go on a course, they know what times and structures and things like that as well. So Tanta's been really, really good, like 4 things like that as well. So I would say those people and those are the kind of things. And UKCA workshops have been really, really good. The ones compared to what it was 10, 11 years ago, I think it's changed so much, and there's been some really, really good practitioners on there, even though it's not been my sport, but the ability to know what's still going on out there, because you never know who you're going to run into. You're not always going to do football at a time, but 70, 90% of the time, it's obviously for me, it's obviously football, fitness and conditioning. But it's still a really, really good thing. I think give credit to UKCA because they've still done a lot of different stuff. They've changed so much and brought some really, really good, vibrant, good practitioners in there as well, and obviously people like yourself where, FFF, where it's been, the platforms have been really, really good, and the kind of practitioners that you brought in there as well, and the ability to give back to people and make them aware of obviously what's going on as well. So I like that, while I'm on the move, I like all those kind of things and things that I can get involved in. So yeah, those things are really, really important to me and good.
Brilliant, mate. Well, Wayne, this has been class. I could literally sit here and chat all day. But I know you're super busy as well, so you need to be getting back to it. But I really appreciate you coming on, mate. But not just coming on, but just like I said, being so honest, being so open, telling stories and your experiences. And if anyone hasn't listened to the previous episode as well, episode 7, I think it was, go back and listen to that as well, because I think we went into some different stuff there as well. Just finally, Wayne, people want to keep an eye on Richardson Sport. You want to keep an eye on what's going on. Give us the links, mate. Where's best to look up?
Yeah, on Twitter at Richardson Sport, Facebook, richardsonsport.com. We've got a link there as well, and at Richardson Sport on Instagram. So obviously those are 3 platforms that are really, really good, and then day-to-day things, you can see what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We'll keep obviously the listeners informed of obviously the things that we're going to be doing with the Academy, WSL, talks at the WSL as well, which is integral. And obviously some of the conversations that I'm having with different universities, which we're going to record and obviously send over as well. So they've got an opportunity to have a look at that. And then just at richardsonsport.co.uk to have a look at our website as well, which will then give you some background about what we do and where we're based.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I really appreciate it, Wayne. It's great to catch up, and all the best to the family. And we'll have an in-person catch up soon. Let's sort that out. And also we'll get another one when you've sorted out all the work I know you've got coming up as well. Let's get another one and talk about that too, because that'll be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Much appreciated.
Top man. Thanks, Wayne.
You're welcome. Bye for now.